In the following two sections, I'm going to share with you how to test your code with two very popular testing frameworks, JUnit and the Rest Assured framework. These two frameworks are very different from each other and are used for different purposes. JUnit is used to test short and mostly isolated pieces of code, like for example, a particular function in your class. You want to make sure that the code in a selected function or a method which is under the test returns unexpected results for a given value. For example, you might create a unit test for a function that generates a user ID or a token. And the goal of your unit test is to make sure that the user ID that your function generates is not null, or that it is exactly 30 characters long. And you might also create a unit test to test your function behavior when it is given a null value instead of a valid email address, or see how it works when a -1 is given instead of a value of months of the year, for example. And although it is possible, normally code in JUnit tests does not communicate with other systems over the network. Like for example, it does not connect to a remote database, and it does not send a HTTP request to another web service over the network. And because of it, and because JUnit test is focused on making sure that the business logic in your particular function in a class performs correctly, rather than on integrating with other systems like databases or web services, JUnit tests are very quick to run, and they often can be run every time you build your code. But of course, it's possible to make your JUnit tests to test code which does connect to a database or sends HTTP request over the network. But in this case, the test is called integration test and will run a bit slower. The Rest Assured framework will be used to actually test the response of our RESTful web service. If with the JUnit test we are testing a selected function in our class, then with the Rest Assured framework we are testing the entire web service endpoint and making sure that the web service endpoint returns unexpected results for a given request parameters. We can check if the HTTP response code is 200 or 500. And if the HTTP response contains the expected by our application HTTP headers, and that the HTTP response body contains the required key value pairs in the JSON document. So in the following section, we will begin testing our code with JUnit 5 first, and we will create a couple of unit tests to test methods in our service class and also in our REST controller class. And I would also like to mention here that the following section is not a comprehensive guide on JUnit 5, and it does not cover much of JUnit 5 API. But even though the following videos are not a complete and comprehensive guide on JUnit 5, the tests that we're going to create should give you a good understanding of how to create a new JUnit test case using the Sprint tool suite, and how to mock objects and stop those objects with needed values, how to use Mockito framework to inject mock objects into the class under the test, and how to use Mockito framework to configure a behavior of a method for a selected mock object. And finally, you will learn how to use JUnit 5 assertions to check and make sure that the method under the test returns expected results for a given parameter or for a given method configuration. So knowing these things, you should be able to create many different unit tests and test much of your code. So in the following section, we will use JUnit 5 to test code in our service layer and also in our REST controller. And we will look at how to test with Rest Assured framework in a different section. So let's begin.